Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me, as always, are my fabulous co-hosts.
Hey, Rob, it's me, Diana.
It's Jackie with her poison ivy that she can't get rid of.
I thought you had like a salve.
I do. And a cleanser and a gel.
Wow.
It just keeps coming back.
That's a lot. Where is it coming from?
Probably my dog or maybe my bed. Who knows? Just keep washing it.
Yeah, eventually you'd think that oil would just sort of go away.
It's just stuck on me forever.
I'm sorry. Poison ivy, it's scary stuff.
Poison ivy.
But anyway, this isn't a botanical podcast. It's a podcast about behavior analysis.
Wish it was, though.
And I don't, because I would have nothing prepared for today's episode. But luckily for us, it's all about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research, where every week we choose a topic in the field and discuss relevant research articles. And today, we are going to be talking about differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. But wait, there's more. We're also going to be talking about differential reinforcement of alternative behavior without, get this, extinction.
I love that.
Did you love that's what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Or you love it when there's extinction in your DRA procedure?
No, I actually don't love it when there's extinction in my DRA procedure.
I mean, I think we'll get into it, but certainly DRA plus extinction is sort of one of those like, well, you know, that's how it goes. But is it?
Have to.
Does it have to? We don't know 100% for sure, but I think
We do now.
I think we have some good surmising, and we'll be able to talk, and then you will be able to judge, the listener.
Yeah.
So why don't we get started with some DRA minus extinction? That should be the name of the article. I think it's without extinction, but minus.
Like minus.
Because usually it's, it's the DRA plus EXT. Just go minus EXT.
I like it.
There we go. That's the episode. So what are we talking about today? We were talking about DRA and extinction, but what articles are we talking about?
Okay, so we're going to talk about 4 different articles today, or at least briefly touch on 4 different articles, because we have actually 2 reviews that we're going to be pulling from in order to give us a really thorough picture of the research that's been done thus far on DRA minus extinction. So those include Systematic Review of Differential Reinforcement of Alternative Behavior Without Extinction for Individuals with Autism by McNall and Neely. That was published in Behavior Modification 2018. There is also Differential Reinforcement Without Extinction, a review of the literature by Trump, Ayers, Quinlan, and Zabala, and that was published in Behavior Analysis Research and Practice 2020. We will also talk about an investigation of differential reinforcement of alternative behavior without extinction by Athens and Vollmer. That was from JABA 2010. And then finally, further investigation of differential reinforcement of alternative behavior without extinction for escape-maintained destructive behavior by Briggs, Dozier, Lesor, Kamana, and Jess. And that was in JABA 2019.
Great.
There you have it.
Well, why don't we start with
My work here is done.
some brief reviews, and then we'll get into some of the specifics of research around DRA without extinction. So when we think DRA, we all think positive. We all love DRA. Everyone loves DRA. We all love reinforcement.
DRA is better than a DRO.
We hate DRO. There's a little DRO in here, but it's not mentioned too much. So it won't be coming up too much in this episode. Everyone really loves DRA. We love choosing a behavior to increase. We love using reinforcement as hopefully our only component of treatment. Maybe there's some there's always a skill acquisition piece. So DRA, great. However, in most research in which DRA is used, there's usually the package of additional extinction. Whether that needs to be the case, it's sort of always felt like, well, differential reinforcement, you've got to have some amount of extinction, right? Because you're reinforcing one behavior, not reinforcing another behavior. So we expect that without extinction, DRA won't necessarily work. But again, one of the goals in our field is to always be coming up with treatments that people will enjoy. And any treatment that
Is that
has
your ABC? Always be coming up with.
Oh. I wasn't sure where that one was going.
I was like, what's happening?
But we want to come up with treatments that people will use because A, they're very effective at increasing useful, appropriate, helpful behaviors and decreasing problem behaviors.
Right. And, when I think about when we talk about extinction, there are some pretty significant side effects with extinction. So there are reasons why we might not want to use extinction, and there might be reasons where we can't use extinction.
And that becomes the problem with extinction.
Right.
It's not something that everyone loves to use for many of those reasons, that it often leads to response bursting. So your extinction burst. It might lead to response variability. So often you'll see sort of just different forms of problem behavior occurring as well. The dollar in the vending machine effect there. So anytime you're using extinction, while it can be very effective, and there is a huge body of literature supporting that its use can be therapeutic, it is often not enjoyed by the consumers and stakeholders. We say, hey, maybe you want to use this because it is hard to use consistently without possibly having to deal with that response bursting. And if you don't use it consistently, you end up with variable ratio or variable interval reinforcement of the problem behavior that you are purported to be treating.
The thing that I think about when I think about extinction too is that emotional responding, right? So there might be a lot of emotional responding. Case in point, I'm going to call out one of my friends right now who I've been texting nonstop for 3 weeks. You know who you are. And he finally responded to me and he said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I ghosted you. And I wrote back and I was like, look at this extinction burst. So many blue Jackie texts, so little person text. I'm not going to call you out, but you know who you are. You're listening. And
did you start using like different words?
Yeah, different words. I was like, hey, I would put it like a little picture. I would like I would ask a question. I would do a statement. And then I was getting a little mad that he wasn't responding to my text. And I was like, but then he just did. And so that was my little extinction burst. But it's like a whole line of like Jackie Blue. Like, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? It's a little stocky. But yeah, that's an example. I didn't like it.
No, it's not fun. Nobody likes it. And again, if you can't come up with a treatment that people like because you at best just have a treatment that no one wants to use. At worst, you have a treatment that people try to use, are unable to use effectively or consistently, and then potentially make the problem that much worse. And usually people don't want to have you come back and say, behavioral analyst, why don't you come back? They'll just say, you're not very good at this job, are you? Things are worse than when you arrived. And you can explain to them, extinction's tough. I think it was a procedural integrity failure on your part, stakeholder. I don't think they'll appreciate that either, especially knowing that it can be a very hard treatment to use. Even in a setting where you would expect, there's lots of trained staff, like a school setting or a clinic setting, high procedural integrity with extinction can just be very difficult for reasons outside of, they just don't like it. It can just be a matter of we cannot safely ride out this extinction burst. So what might that look like is the question that our 2 review articles sort of ask. And is there any research to support the use of DRA or DRO, but we don't really want to talk about that too much, without extinction? And then we're going to talk about 2 articles that go into some of the nitty gritty of how you would test that and what those results more specifically were. So in terms of looking at the review, we have our 2. We have the Trump et al. 2020, and we have the McNall and Neely 2018. Of these 2 articles, I will say I did love the beginning of the Trump et al. 2020. I think it gave a really great case as to why extinction as a component of a DRA procedure is potentially tenuous. I don't want to say dangerous because it has been used effectively before, but it's sort of not one that would be used if we could avoid it. So they make a really great case as to why this is an important line of research to review. I then found that they did what I don't love in a review paper, which is literally just have some really general summaries of some findings or some components of the findings using very highfalutin single case kind of research methodology scoring systems. Whereas I found the McNall and Neely did what I love a review paper to do, especially as a practitioner, which is literally describe a couple papers and then give some details as to what happened in those papers so that I can choose whether or not I should read those papers as well, or whether I got enough information to know if they would be valuable to the problem I am probably, looking to resolve or to learn more about.
Well, the Trump et al. Paper is listed as a review and conceptual. That's like part of not the title, but I think the category that it's being published under. So that might be a difference. And some people might really want that.
It's got a place. And that place is not read by me.
Well, it was read by you.
So, it was read by me. Now I'm going to talk about it.
So much work goes into a review paper.
Too much work.
It's so, anytime you see a review paper, you're like, oh man, someone has devoted like months of their life to prepare this thing for my consumption. So I always appreciate them.
Years.
I mean, not necessarily for this topic because they did not find too many articles that had actually researched this phenomenon, which again, if you want to write a great review paper, find something that there's maybe 3 research papers about and then write your review. It won't take that long.
2.
I found
I
there
know
were
in
only
the
2
McNall,
articles.
there's 10, I think, that
They only found 10 in the McNall.
Yeah.
Trump
I remember from Trump.
found 32 articles.
Oh, look at that big jump. 10 to 32.
Well, they had to find
Wider
more
net.
because McNall and Neely came first, so they couldn't just write the same review
No,
article.
I know, but I'm like from 10.
Well, there's only 2 years difference between. I think it's a wider net.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's always good to like think about it. Is it like more research is being done on the topic, or was there a wider net? Maybe a little bit of both.
Well, McNall is specifically escape maintained behavior.
So let's see what they found. So again, we've got 2 lit reviews. They're looking at things like what populations have been served with DRA without extinction procedure, or differential reinforcement with extinction procedures more broadly. There has to be a problem behavior being treated. All of these articles wanted an FA reporting what the function of the problem behavior was, what type of treatment, was it a DRA, DRO? Trump et al. Specifically wanted to know if it was FCT, which would be a form of DRA. And overall results. Because again, at the end of the day, you need to know, were these results effective? Were these treatments effective? And they all had to specifically mention that they did not use extinction. Well, how would you do that? How would you do differential reinforcement without extinction? Because, of course, it's very hard to differentially reinforce if you're not removing all reinforcement for the problem behavior, isn't it? And the answer is, well, no, because you could always reinforce the problem behavior and reinforce the alternative behavior. But Rob, you might say, what do the authors find? Because that sounds like it totally wouldn't work. Because isn't that what everyone's already doing when they're saying this treatment isn't working? And the answer would be yes, because you probably would need to change the quality or magnitude or delay to reinforcement or some variable of reinforcement, right, to actually have the differentiation, which I'm sad to say, just talking about it out loud made me think, wait a minute, the differential is not no reinforcement and reinforcement. It's just different reinforcement on some value.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that specifically. I always thought about it as it's like a binary.
You know, now it's part of the task list, so you would have thought of it.
Oh, I would have. I probably still wouldn't have.
Well, because it's part of the task list that you need to know the different variables of reinforcement and the parameters of which you can manipulate reinforcement. And this is all of those, right? And you can say the ones that are of high quality, immediate, without a delay, are going to produce more significant changes in behavior than something that is of lower quality, of lower magnitude, and that has a bigger delay between the behavior and the access to reinforcers. So pretty fun.
Yeah. And I've always understood that reinforcement has different values that you can manipulate, but it's never really clicked because I always thought of DR as like, well, it's just an all or nothing game.
Yeah.
You're reinforcing, you're not reinforcing.
I could reinforce a behavior with Cheerios or with almond butter puffs, which are consequently so much better.
Oh, are they? Okay. I
They're
would.
really
I don't know.
good. You should get them at Trader Joe's.
Okay.
They're really good.
The Bomba?
No, they're like almond butter cereal puffs.
Oh, the Puffins.
No, they're just called almond butter cereal puffs. Okay. But they're delicious. They're made of almond butter.
There we go. So there are all sorts of numbers. You know, between the 2 articles, you've got Trump, looked at 32 different articles, and they had 109 experiments within, which means that there were articles I would not want to read because I like one experiment per article. They had a bunch of different participants with different types of disabilities. And then the McNall and Neely, they looked at just the 10 studies to sort of see, all right, well, what was done? And, you had a variety of studies doing a variety of manipulations. Some examples kind of went back into even like the late 90s. So we had a Piazza study where they were, Piazza and the colleagues were looking at a FCR procedure with physical attention for the FCR and verbal attention with the problem behavior. And since physical attention was a higher quality reinforcer, even though both behaviors were reinforced, you saw an increase in the FCR. Lally and colleagues looked at edibles following the completion of work, so kind of a DRA procedure. So complete work, you get edibles. Problem behavior during work, you get to stop the work for 30 seconds. And edibles were, again, higher quality reinforcer. We looked, you see some things where you see, the length of the reinforcer, so brief escape versus, longer escape from a task. So again, lots of manipulations of the different types of DRA. And McNall and McNeely have like the really good, what you always love, like, could you just give me a giant table with all these
love
articles?
those giant tables.
And
Yeah.
that has it. Again, I think the difference here is when you look at McNall and Neely, they are possibly, I think, the first review of DRA of DR without extinction. So they were very clear. We're not looking at each of these studies as, are these amazing examples of single case research? Just, are there studies in which extinction was not used with reinforcement or differential reinforcement procedure, and what happened? So their results in terms of looking at how positive were the results, very positive.
Right.
However, when you look at the Trump et al., they are using much more stringent criteria. So your very positive results dropped quite a bit. We saw, with clinicians, you had about 31% positive effects of treatments in which extinction was not used. That does not mean that they were not effective treatments. It just means according to very stringent research design. It's usually something like they didn't put social validity questions or procedural integrity checklists. Therefore, this is not great research. However, the funny thing in Trump et al., even though they were using those more stringent criteria, it seemed like individuals who were not clinicians actually had better effects. So was that just the better research done later in those settings? Was it just the settings and the individuals themselves, or the problem behavior, or the type of problem behavior they were looking for? It's not really clear. But it does seem that DRA without extinction, and DRO too, but again, we're not talking too much about that, can be an effective treatment. Not always, and some caveats, that it's not always effective enough. Socially significantly effective. And there are studies where they did use, they varied the reinforcement on, either the magnitude or the latency to it, and it just was not effective at decreasing problem behavior and increasing appropriate behavior.
We'll talk about that.
Until extinction was added. And there is also the question of, just because we as clinicians and researchers and therapists say, we never want to use extinction, there's so many problems with it, let's only use reinforcement, that doesn't necessarily then mean that the client would prefer that. I think, Trump, I can't remember if it was McNall and Neely now or Trump et al., really talked about the idea that some clients do prefer treatments that have at least, punishment components in them. So just because we think it is better, ethically to only use reinforcement when we can, does not necessarily mean the client would agree. But I think that has more to do with making sure we're thinking about client preferences and client assent rather than, therefore, you should not use these procedures. But I thought that was an interesting point they made. So overall, if you are interested in using DRA without extinction, there is a body of research to support that it can be useful. However, it's not so much research that you can necessarily say that it will work all the time. But
It's hard to say that about much.
it's hard to say that about much. But I think it still would
Hey,
fall
guys.
into that category of use with caution, be very aware that you are doing this. Good for you. You should try this first, but it may not work. You have to be very aware of whether you are getting good enough results and then decide you may need to implement an extinction procedure. You still may.
Hey, I don't know much, but I know I love you.
Oh, that may be
So
all you need
nice.
to know.
That's right. If anyone knows that song
So
from the 80s.
So since the other problem with a good review article is they usually just throw a lot of little mini experiments that are very hard to then say how you'd be replicable, why don't we talk about 2 such experiments to get a better sense of what exactly it would look like to set up an advantageous schedule of reinforcement for appropriate behavior versus problem behavior?
Yeah.
But I don't want to do that right now. I'd rather take a little break.
No!
And then we'll be right back with some more specific research on the topic. We'll be right back.
Do you want to be a BCBA?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Mass. to get your graduate degree.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education.
Dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster's certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years. And our 2017 grads had a 100% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy practicum placement support, ethics mini handbooks, PhD level professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland.
If interested, don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu, regiscollege.edu. One more time, www.regiscollege.edu.
See you there!
And we are back talking about differential reinforcement of alternate behavior without extinction or minus extinction. But before we get into some more articles, I want to remind our listeners that ABA Inside Track is ACE and QABA approved. And by listening to this episode, you're able to earn 1 CE. All you need to do is finish listening and then go to our website, abainsidetrack.com, or click the link in your podcast player's show notes to go directly to the CE of your choice. You're going to need some information, though, including 2 secret code words that we've hidden in this episode. And the first one is right here. It's easy to find. I'm saying it now. It's pinstripe. Pinstripe. Like a suit. It's a pattern.
You know what pinstripe makes me think of?
What?
The Yankees.
Oh, do you know what it makes me think of? The beach.
Why?
Like pinstripe linen shorts.
Oh. Okay. I don't think of either of those things. I don't know what I think of when I think
You
of
probably
pinstripe.
think of a suit because you said that.
Probably the word, probably pinstripe suit. The thing I said.
Like a zoot suit?
Zoot Suit Riot.
Guess?
Oh, I'm bringing all the good songs back.
That was a good
It's
song.
great, yeah. What would we do without the swing revival of the 90s? Pinstripe.
That was fun.
All right. Well, why don't we discuss one of the, I think, most referenced articles in both of the reviews, which is
Real heavy hitter.
Athens and Vollmer.
Can I tell you why? It's a real most cited review because they really went to town.
So I'm gonna put them on blast. Athens, Vollmer, you listen up. You're on blast from me, Rob. I don't like an experiment. I don't like a research paper. Actually, I love one experiment. A research paper with 2 experiments, nuts to you. 3 experiments, you can just get out of town. Jackie, 4 experiments.
Usually
4 experiments.
I know,
I don't even want to talk about this. You know what? This episode is over.
Usually I am on your side. Usually I'm like, why couldn't you make these 4 different studies?
That's probably what they wanted to know, too.
You're probably right. But I honestly think they, in and of themselves, would not be as powerful as this powerhouse of all 4 experiments together because they're like tiers. So we'll get there.
On principle, I cannot.
Okay, well, I think that
Athens and Vollmer, I'm expecting an apology. You can email me at ABA Inside Track.
he's going to now. And he's
and
going to do
say,
it.
I'm very sorry we had 4 experiments.
I think it's amazing.
We had to do it to demonstrate the point we were trying to
We did.
make. And it was a good study. However, you're right. I should have thought twice and come up with one super
Another reason
experiment.
why they might not have been able to do 4 separate studies is because the first 3 experiments didn't demonstrate functional control.
That was a big problem.
Experimental control, right? But it's okay because that wasn't it's not really ultimately the purpose. They used the strongest design.
But what if you just did the last one and then said, we tried to do it separately in 3 other experiments that we won't bore you with right now.
But we need
and
them.
the results were crummy.
Because there was some
don't worry
good
about
results.
I know.
All right. Anyway, so when they're looking at a DRA without extinction, they're conceptualizing it as a concurrent operance arrangement. And I'm going to let the newer listeners remember that a concurrent operance arrangement has 2 or more schedules in effect at the same time. And there will be different responses on each schedule. And each schedule will have different reinforcers.
Yes.
Yeah. So just
If you were going to let
remind.
them remember, wouldn't you just sit quietly while they all sat there and remembered?
Wouldn't that be awesome? Please remember.
You reminded them.
No, I reminded you. Yes.
Next time, though, listeners, we will let you remember. And it's just going to be quiet for like 30 seconds.
That would be weird. And another thing that they were acting under the assumption is that previous research had suggested that when you are having these concurrent operance arrangements, that the behavior should align with the generalized matching law, which we're not really going to talk about, but it should be that if you provide more reinforcement for one behavior, then the other behavior responding should allocate toward the behavior that receives more reinforcers. But when you're looking at a concurrent operance between problem behavior and alternative behavior, that's not usually the case. Usually there is a bias toward the problem behavior. I'm assuming because it's easier, right? And there's more history.
and there's a history.
Yeah. So that is a good thing to think about as they set this experiment up. They bring it all up in the introduction. which is why I'm talking about it. And they said that you can't use a ratio schedule because reinforcer delivery would be maximized. So that's why they use an interval schedule, which is amazing. And another thing I love is that they use the interval schedule correctly, because many times people are using interval schedules incorrectly. So as a reminder...
Aren't you glad you don't have to say that Tim Vollmer used the reinforcement schedule?
I'd be like, I'm not going to talk about this. But this makes me so happy because I've been talking about interval schedules with my students a lot, because there's a common problem clinically where people use interval schedules as time schedules. So the difference is, with an interval schedule, you have to satisfy two requirements. The time requirement, right? A certain amount of time has to pass. And then reinforcements delivered for the first response after that time requirement has passed. A lot of times in clinical practice, I've noticed when I'm consulting, people will be like, I'm using an FI5. And then at 5 minutes, they just provide the reinforcer regardless of the behavior, and that's actually a time schedule.
Or not, well, not
It's fixed time.
Yeah.
It's fixed time. It's not an interval schedule, so they're just using it incorrectly. But, so they use a concurrent interval schedule, a variable interval schedule for both problem behavior and alternative behavior. VI20, VI20. Don't be scared when you see that, because I used to be. I'd be like, what does that mean? Just means the two schedules are operating concurrently or together.
I did find with the VI versus, say, the VR schedules, it did take, like, I kind of wish I had a movie clip with some of these, because I understood generally what they were doing.
Yeah.
But then this idea of, and we're presenting a task and we're allowing escape, but for this period and not for that, but we'll give a better reinforcer for this, but only after a period of time. I was like, there's a lot of variables you're playing around with.
Right.
I feel like I could not run this schedule that you are throwing out there.
No, you probably could. You would just need someone that's well versed in the time. So they had someone that was well versed in the timer, right? They had two timers. Both were going on different the VI schedules, and they would tell the participant when. They would give them a little tap on the window or a head nod. I love that. They were like,
How many timers does somebody need to use before social validity just goes out the window?
I know, but they're not.
Was the number of timers in this study or this treatment appropriate? Yes, not very much.
That's timer validity.
Yeah. One time.
We haven't talked about that yet.
One time validity. Anyway, so I love also that they use the interval schedule, because that's probably what's happening in the natural environment, right? With caregivers, nobody's really using a ratio schedule or even a fixed time in real life. So really what this study wanted to do was to extend the research that Rob, you talked about, by examining the influence of multiple dimensions of reinforcement and by incorporating these VI schedules. And they did 4 experiments, and they varied the dimensions by duration, experiment 1, quality, experiment 2, delay, experiment 3, and combined everything to be the best case scenario versus the worst case scenario for experiment 4. So they had 7 participants.
But they didn't want to do number 4 first and then say, look how great this is, and then do the component analysis
Maybe
of
they
combined.
did. I don't know. I don't think
Maybe they did. I don't know.
They could have. You're right. They could have. They could have tore it apart that way too, but they didn't. So they had 7 participants. All of them had socially mediated, pretty significant challenging behavior. They were at an outpatient clinic, or 2 were in a classroom at an outside school placement. They chose behaviors for the alternative behavior based on the function of the problem behavior, such as like manding if it was socially mediated. And the behaviors were already in the repertoire, but they didn't occur at a high rate. I think that's important to know. So, man, sessions were conducted 4 to 16 times per day. Wow, what else were you doing?
That's a lot.
That's a lot of time.
5 days per week for 10 minutes. They had a 5-minute break in between. They used a multi-element design for the FA and reversals, which is, again, the strongest demonstration of functional control design we have, and the one that is the hardest. So they really went for the stars here. IOA was really awesome. They had a ton of dependent variables. They had a nice little table. Each participant had their own little problem behavior definition. So if you want to look at the table, you can do that. They ran a stimulus preference assessment. It was a paired stimulus preference assessment to use both in the FA and in some of the treatment analysis where tangible was the maintaining variable of the problem behavior. Man, I feel so bad for people when they have to do a stimulus preference assessment and an FA before they even start their experiment. Right?
Yeah, you got to get all those ducks
experiments all
lined up.
Yep. Yeah. But they do. They also did a functional analysis. It was similar to the procedures by Iwata, because remember, this is 2010, so we can't knock that. We can't be like, why didn't they use something else?
I don't think we'd have to knock it even if they did that now.
No, that's true. But they did have to, for one participant, I call him G because I don't like using the names. They had to use blocking for the safety of the therapist.
Oh, the aggression?
The
It was head-directed aggression, right?
Head-directed aggression. So they did have to block.
I felt like they were really apologizing to
know.
I'm so sorry. We should have just stood there and just been punched in the head
Right,
repeatedly.
the limitation
Our
is-
bad. Sorry about that. Like I get experimentally why you have to mention it.
Yeah.
But there was like a tone of like, I wish we could have done this just so purely.
Yes,
Just gotten a
but you
concussion.
couldn't.
But no,
Right,
we
but
get
you
it.
couldn't because it was very severe. So a variety of problem behavior maintained by escape, attention, and tangible. So the baseline was a VI20 VI2 per problem behavior and alternative behavior. They used a random number generator to select the intervals, which you need to, right?
I
with the
know, but
VI.
oh man, you're adding a lot of steps and you're not even doing the treatment yet.
I know. Okay. So the first instance of the behavior following the availability of a reinforcer resulted in the delivery of the reinforcer, right? So except in experiment 1, because that's what they were modifying. So it's important that the VI clock was stopped when the reinforcer was being consumed. And then they had baseline, and it was the same across each of the different conditions except one modified the, the time, the quality, and the delay, and then all of them together. So they had like a 30-second for the time, a high quality for the magnitude, a 0-second delay for the delay, and then all of them together. So with the first experiment, they had a 30-second access to alternative behavior, or 30-second access to reinforcement contingent on alternative behavior, and a 10-second access to the same reinforcer contingent problem behavior. For 2 participants, one was an access to a break, one was an access to a toy. They also increased it to a 45-second to 5-second, same kind of ratio for one of the participants because it didn't work originally. So they wanted to make the 2 more salient. And what they found for that one was there was higher rates of problem behavior in baseline, which supports the notion, right, that the matching law wouldn't necessarily apply when you have problem behavior and alternative behavior. They initially saw some slight decreases in problem behavior for both the participants when they added in the change.
The
Time,
amount of
the
time.
time that they would get. But then they saw decreases of that, so problem behavior reemerged for one of the participants, and that's why they changed it. One of the participants just saw higher rates of problem behavior during baseline and then lower rates during that treatment, so they didn't have to do that other one. So that was experiment 1. Done. Experiment 2. They just modify the magnitude. And I love this. They use the room where the therapist stood in the middle. I just love the split room.
I do too. I know.
assessment. I don't get to use it enough.
The concurrent operants.
Yeah, I just love it. Just love it. Anyway, so the therapist is in the middle of the room. On one side of the room, there are green blocks. On the other side of the room, there are orange blocks. And they did a pre-session prompt where they said, if you play with these green blocks, I'm going to say, yay, good job, you're amazing. If you play with the orange blocks, I'm going to say, don't play with those orange blocks, with a reprimand. And then they showed that this one participant, Kenneth, K-Dog, selected verbal praise 98% of the time. So they said, okay, for here, high quality is praise, low quality is reprimand. Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. So the first
Makes
thing
sense.
the first thing they did is had one high quality contingent on alternative behavior and one low quality contingent on problem behavior. They also had access to 30 seconds escape contingent on problem behavior for one of them. And Kenneth got reprimands and praise. And so that didn't change behavior. So then they upped the ante and provided 3 high quality items. They had to do that because they couldn't provide the highest quality item, which was video games, because it always is, isn't it? So they had to do 3 high quality items to 1 low quality item. And for Kenneth, he got hugs and tickles as well as praise. So that's how they added that in for him, and just reprimands for problem behavior.
Was it Wii Bowling? It's always Wii Bowling.
It probably was Wii Bowling in 2010.
Yeah.
2010. Yeah,
Right?
most
So
likely.
again, what they found in experiment 2 was that in baseline, you saw higher rates of problem behavior than alternative behavior. Then you didn't really see any changes with the 1 HQ, 1 high quality, I love that they call it, versus 1 lower quality. But when they increased it to 3 high quality and then 1 low quality, you saw a decrease in problem behavior and an increase in alternative behavior. But here's where the catch is. They could never increased problem behavior again. Even when they went back to the one high quality, low high quality, problem behavior remained low. So they didn't demonstrate.
Which is only a problem for research reasons.
Right.
Not for real life reasons.
Right. In real life reasons, you're like, phew.
Most people would just shrug and say, yeah, okay.
Great.
Yeah. I didn't want to give 3
He's doing great.
toys.
So they were like, bam, we didn't demonstrate functional control here. Let's continue on. Now they're looking at the delay. So they had a 0-second delay for appropriate behavior and a 30-second delay for problem behavior. They had 2 participants. And so alternative behavior produced the high quality toy. Problem behavior also produced the high quality toy, but after 30 seconds. And one of the participants accessed a break immediately for alternative behavior and then a break after 30 seconds delay if there was problem behavior. So again, once the delay started, problem behavior didn't increase or restart the delay. That's important to note. And so they didn't see results. Spoiler. They didn't see results there, and so they increased the delay to 60 seconds. That's when they saw results, and they showed replication there. So then, last experiment, bringing it on home, they did it all together for optimal alternative behavior and suboptimal problem behavior.
She's rounding third.
Because they didn't see great changes in the previous experiments, and they didn't have experimental control. They also looked at generalization and maintenance for 2 of the participants, although they did say that one of the participants got a sore throat. They got strep throat. And the caregiver did not tell them, and so I messed with their data, but once the sore throat went away...
It's all good.
It's all good. I just love that when people put that in there.
Good.
Jackie, could you tell us
for those external variables?
Right.
Could you tell us the names of each of these conditions? They really roll off the tongue.
You know, I can't because I didn't write them down. Because they're like, because they're too hard. It's like one.
I'm sure I have them.
No, I have them. I'll
Experiment 1, duration.
No. There's
No. Experiment 4 specifically.
I do have that one for you. It is called Experiment 4 was 30-second SDR HQO 0-second delay / 5-second delay LQ 10-second delay.
I see, yes.
Right?
As a parent, I'm sure I would love to see that on my treatment protocol to run later on.
It does roll off the tongue.
It does. Yes. Yeah, so that's what they were looking at, right? Here's where they had the blocking of aggression.
Strike 5, Athens and Vollmer. Too many letters in your conditions. In your 4th. Maybe if we're the first experiment, I'd still have patience. But the 4th experiment, come on.
They did a reinforcement assessment for G-Dog, similar to what they did with K-Dog, George and Kenneth. And they found that he also enjoyed praise and tickles. And so experiment 4, this is what worked. When they manipulated everything. And they did say the limitation was that they had to block the aggression. So it could have been extinction there, right? Or punishment. But they did suggest that it wasn't because it didn't really do anything to behavior in the FA condition. So I love that they put the limitation in there like, but it's not. I love when people write that. It's like a review or 2 thing.
It exactly is.
Right?
You might think this is a limitation.
But it didn't
but
matter.
It's not. And so what they said was that, the teachers really appreciated this. They said that we're going to try to do our best. One of the participants' teachers stated that they couldn't ignore the behavior because it was aggression toward peers. Mm-hmm. So they appreciated that they saw this decrease in problem behavior because they would have to reinforce it and at some point to keep people safe. And then the other one is great because the kid was in his whole separate classroom with one other student. And because of this procedure, he could go back with 4 other students.
Yeah.
That's just great.
That's
I love it when
nice.
people add that in there. And one other big, huge...
The epilogue of your research paper.
What happened
Anecdotally.
5 years later? And I think the biggest limitation that they pointed out, which is a problem with interval schedules, is that some of the participants didn't respond immediately after the time delay was over, so that there was a less dense schedule of reinforcement than they had originally wanted. Mm-hmm. But they saw it. So do it all. Change everything, and then that might be effective.
So... Again, and like we knew in the review, it's not a surprise that there are papers in which DRA without extinction worked, because there was a whole review that went over these, and all of them, both of them discussed this article in a little more detail than some of the other DRA without extinction articles. So that's kind of the big one.
That's a big article.
Goes through all the ways that you could make that more advantageous reinforcement schedule. But Diana, we've got another article, a little more recent article than Athens and Vollmer.
Yeah, so certainly building off of Athens and Vollmer, I took a look at the Briggs et al. Article. And so they wanted us to know that extinction can be problematic for several reasons, many of which we've already discussed. It can also be dangerous to attempt to implement escape extinction specifically, and often, as we already said as well, virtually impossible to do so with 100% fidelity. If you're not implementing extinction with 100% fidelity, you're not actually doing extinction. Rather, you've established a very thin schedule of reinforcement that may potentially be maintaining responding. So that, just sort of general challenges with feasibility of extinction paired with the often considerable side effects that one sees with extinction can make it a really unsavory treatment option, even though there is a large body of research suggesting its efficacy. So they said what we could do is look at DRA as a potential alternative option. And really the idea here, and they presented the same thing that yours did, Jackie, thinking about this as a concurrent operants arrangement, right? So we're not eliminating the possibility of receiving reinforcement for behavior that we're looking to decrease, but rather both responses are potentially available at the same time. So the alternative response is going to have its own schedule of reinforcement, and then the behavior we're trying to decrease is also going to have its own schedule of reinforcement available. But what we can do is try to attempt to shift allocation towards the alternative response by making whatever reinforcer is available on that schedule bigger, better, faster, more, right? So that's the idea. So Athens and Vollmer obviously did a great job of breaking all of this down already.
Amazing.
They looked a lot at magnitude. So in this Briggs et al. Study, they also said, well, what if we dabbled in magnitude of the reinforcer, but also looked at the quality of the reinforcer and tried to parse out which pieces may be important. So we had 4 participants in this study. Anna was 4, Queenie was 5, Brock was 16, and Janice was 14. And all of them had a diagnosis of some type of developmental disability. All of them could follow at least 1 or sometimes 2-step instructions. None of them had a history with token economy, and all were referred for this study because they engaged in some type of what they call destructive behavior, which for all 4 of them included aggression, and then for Janice also included self-injury of body to object behavior. So they were looking at 2 main things here. The first was latency to destructive behavior as measured in the FA, and then destructive behavior in the other treatment assessment that we came to, and then the percentage of completion of instructional demands. And their IOA was really good, except one time where they got a 42%, which everyone probably cursed about.
Right? They're like, no, do we have to include it?
But it was on the latency data.
That's hard.
And so they were like, it was a super short latency. And so one of them probably had 2 seconds and one had 3 seconds. And so we got, crappy IOA. So other than that, everything was great in that front. So you probably don't need to worry. So first, as I just alluded to, they did a latency-based FA. They included every possible condition that they could think of here because I think that they really weren't quite sure what was going on. So they had a diverted attention condition. They had a social avoidance condition. For 2 participants, they had tangible conditions, both leisure and edible. They had a no interaction condition, a play condition, and an escape condition. And I feel like I'm forgetting one. Maybe I got them all. Maybe I got them all. Okay. So then results of the FA real quick. Anna's was very clearly escape. Queenie's was very clearly escape. Brock's was quite undifferentiated across several of the conditions. So it may have been attention, leisure, edible, or escape, and probably some of all of them. And then Janice was maybe kind of escape, but it was also kind of messy, and they had to do an extended thing. But that's kind of what they landed on for her.
FAs can be messy sometimes.
Yes, they can. So after they established that, then they did an attention assessment because they wanted to figure out how are they going to make this alternate high quality situation, right? So that was what the attention assessment was for. They referenced other studies that have done social reinforcers assessment. And for this one, they used a pictorial paired stimulus assessment, which is nice, right? So they had pictures of different...
They didn't just have a bunch of people standing there with their hands ready for tickles or head rubs.
Well, that's, part of what's hard about this doing one of these. So they had little pictures, and they included various different types of social interaction. So tickles, head rubs, praise, conversation, high fives, hugs, and facial expressions. And there was also a white control card in case you didn't like any of those things. So they went through all of that. Anything that was above 80% was then used as one of the high quality conditions in the DRA procedure. And just so you know, Anna liked hugs. Brock liked facial expressions.
I like all these.
I used to work with someone who really liked funny facial expressions. And Queenie and Janice both liked conversation. And then after that, they did a token assessment. So remember I said before, they had no prior experience with tokens. They checked to make sure. Turns out tokens on their own, not related to a reinforcer, were not reinforcing. And once that was established,
Great.
get on to the reason why we were all here, which was to look at DRA minus extinction and evaluate what component of the reinforcer that was going to be available for the alternative response was most critical to be present. So they played around with it. It wasn't really a component analysis because with that, I think you would generally present the whole package first and then, actually you can do it either way.
Yeah.
You actually can do it either way. So maybe we could think of it in that sense a little bit, but that's not how they talked about it. Rather, they said, we're going to look at the pieces combined and then broken apart and then combined again. So we had a magnitude, quality, and then a combined condition. And this was arranged as a reversal design. And the order of conditions varied a little bit, participant to participant, but they went something like an equated condition, a magnitude condition, a quality condition, back to an equated condition, back to equality, and then to combined, and then to fading. 10-minute sessions. You might wonder what were the instructional materials, since this was based on the demand condition. They used the same ones that they used in the FA, which was difficult tasks for the participants. And only Anna and Janice had a baseline condition, but they did that in order to just confirm what their responding looks like. And it was high in those conditions. Yeah. So for that condition, and I'm just going to quickly go through what each of these looked like. So baseline, they received praise for instruction following, 30 seconds of break for destructive behavior. In the equated consequences condition, they received a 30-second break for instruction following and a 30-second break for destructive behavior.
Okay.
In the magnitude manipulation condition, they received a high magnitude break for instruction following, and that was defined as 2 minutes of escape from activity. Or they received a 30-second break for destructive behavior. In the quality manipulation condition, they received a quote-unquote high-quality break for 30 seconds following for instruction following. And during that 30 seconds, the high quality was the social piece that they chose in the social reinforcer assessment. Or they got a 30-second break for destructive behavior.
Makes sense.
In the combined condition, they got a high magnitude, high quality break. So 2 minutes of conversation, for example, for instruction following, or a 30-second break for destructive behavior. And then lastly, there was an enhanced combined condition that was only for Janice, which was just like the combined condition, but it was for 4 minutes instead of 2 minutes. And I'm sure you can guess why.
Yep.
Okay. And then once they found out what worked the best, they then moved on to doing a DRA without extinction schedule thinning, where they chose the most effective condition and then introduced those tokens that we talked about before. And they moved from an FR1 token exchange all the way up to an FR20 was their terminal goal. Some people reached it, some did not. And they had all sorts of criteria set up as to, when you move up and down, as any good researcher should have that in place. And all the while, just to make sure we're all clear, there is no extinction. Challenging behavior still results in escape from demand. All right. And this was a very thoroughly designed and well-structured study. They have really nice detailed data, and several of these sessions, took quite a while because they, really took their time with that fading component. So for Anna, initially they had some we're looking to decrease the destructive behavior, increase instruction following. So initially they saw that type of therapeutic effect with the equated condition, but over time it deteriorated in that her instruction following was only, I wrote it was only quote unquote mid. Still trying to use my teenager slang.
I love that.
Yeah. What really made the difference for her was the quality, right? So when she had that quality manipulation component, for her, I think it was hugs, I said. That was what really shifted the allocation of her responding away from destructive behavior to the instruction following condition. That was very effective. The combined one, they also tested that. That was very effective. And for her, they were able to fade all the way up to that FR20 schedule.
Wow.
Queenie's data looked very similar. Quality was also very effective for her. She also made it up to the FR20. For Brock, quality was initially effective, the enhanced quality condition, but when they started fading it out, they saw an increase in destructive behavior. So they moved under the combined condition where he was getting both the high quality and the high magnitude reinforcer. That worked really well. For him, they went up to an FR10. And then for Janice, she was definitely the most complex case here. So initially, the data looked pretty good in the equated condition, but then instruction following really deteriorated. Her responding was variable across all conditions until they hit on that enhanced combined one, where she got the 4-minute break. There, they finally saw the therapeutic effect they were looking for. But when they were doing this thing where they were trying to do this like terminal goal probe, they would like attempt to do the FR20, and when they did that, everything fell apart basically, and they were really not ever able to recover it. So they got her back up to an FR10, but they ended the whole thing on an FR1.
So one instruction and then 4 minutes of everything.
Yeah.
Which is better than problem behavior and no instructions.
Yes. So that was kind of where they landed for her. So for our participants, just quickly to summarize, for 2 of them, just enhancing the quality of the break was enough. For the other 2, they needed to enhance both the quality and the magnitude of the break, but they were still able to do this without extinction.
Yay!
Which is awesome, right? They also know for Janice, too, that a lot of the destructive behavior they saw from her happened on break. Mm-hmm. So they said even though they didn't capture it in the FA, there was probably some other multiply maintained behavior going on there.
And when they said they were not using extinction, it was really just the escape extinction.
They were
then delivered. Well, all these things could be, seem like the FA says they could be related, so we're going to give you everything. It was really just the task.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yes, they just were thinking of all of them as escape maintained.
Right.
Behavior. But this article combined with Jackie's article could give you a lot of good ideas on how you might be able to make modifications for your own clients.
So that leads me to kind of an extension question. If you're using DRA...
No, don't do that yet.
No? Oh, jeez. I almost got hit by the freaking train.
It came in quick and fast.
Jeez.
Dissemination Station.
That's what happens if you're not paying attention at Dissemination Station. I'm just lost in thought. I'm wandering on the tracks. So
you got hit by the train. The dissemination train. Okay,
we know. Big take home. If you love DRA and you say, I don't want to use extinction, well, good news. It's possible you do not need to. You can manipulate different... I'm trying to think of the word. It's not variables of reinforcement. It's dimensions of reinforcement. I'm like really sure. Okay, I'm going to go back and say it. Good news. You can manipulate different dimensions of reinforcement. Seemingly combined. If you're not sure which is going to work, you might want to start with all 3, or you could do a high quality versus low quality, or magnitude.
Or you could do whatever's easiest.
You could do whatever's easiest.
Right, like you can think to yourself, okay, what do I have access to? Can I give them more? Can I give
the better version?
Delay? Right, like whatever's easiest, start there. Because if you're theoretically in a classroom, you probably can't do everything.
Yep.
Right, so what would be easiest? Start there, and then work your way up. Is what I would say.
Yeah. And then if you're not able to withhold, or you choose not to withhold whatever the reinforcer for the problem behavior is, well, okay, fine. Still deliver it. Just make sure that not as much or as long or as quickly as the alternate reinforcer. So it can be effective. But I guess that does raise a question. When you are using a DRA procedure after you finish your FA, whatever FA you use, if you are only allowing for escape, let's say, or are only delivering attention for a multiply maintained problem behavior, wouldn't you still be putting the behavior on extinction in some way, if just not maybe the same extent of extinction?
I did not follow the question.
So if it were multiply maintained problem behavior, so like Janice, for example,
yeah.
technically, isn't it possible they were using extinction even though they were trying not to use extinction because they were not necessarily delivering all of the putative reinforcers? And if
It's possible.
that was, that would be something. I'd be curious to see if you had multiply maintained behavior, so it's escape and attention maintained behavior, and you just delivered escape as the reinforcer. Could you potentially consider that? Well, that's the low quality because I'm delivering a reinforcer, but not both reinforcers.
It may depend on the situation too,
Yeah.
and which one's more potent. Because usually they're not both equally as effective in a situation. They may one might have an edge.
So you don't need to worry that if you don't deliver all the reinforcers, you're no longer you're accidentally using extinction when you didn't mean to.
I mean, that could be the case.
It's possible.
Probably
You'd have to
not.
look. I mean, you have to look at your rates. I would be surprised though if you're like, fine, you get to escape, and I didn't deliver you any attention, and then you see an extinction burst, and then a total drop off.
Yeah.
That would be surprising results. I guess it could happen.
It
All
could
right.
happen.
So there's still questions I think about how the utility of this procedure. I mean, certainly while we know there are lots of challenges with extinction, I would have loved to see in the previous study whether or not for Janice, was extinction, if extinction had been used, would they have gotten good results, or would it have just been the same sort of difficult situation it had been before? Articles maybe comparing the two, but again, I think the question of comparing the two might be moot to some extent because our goal is to not use extinction whenever we do not have to. So would there be a value, or could you say there is a value? But if we used extinction, it would have been so much faster. When you could say, yes, but we didn't use extinction and we ended up at the same spot. It might have taken a little bit longer. I know there are resource limitations that might, come into play, and we can't just say, well, no, don't worry about that. But still, I don't know if it's even a research question I care that much about. If you can do it, you should try it. And if it's effective, great. And if it is not, well, we know there is a literature about adding extinction to a DRA procedure that you could go to if you needed to, following your combined dimensions condition.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wraps it up.
I can't imagine anyone would be against this as an idea because while I think a lot of people sort of as a common sense response know what extinction is, I don't know anyone who would ever say, even if they're not using the term extinction, that they engaged in extinction and then it was successful, usually because they're just engaging in extinction as opposed to extinction plus anything else.
Yeah.
So that's at the bottom. So if you're going to do a treatment, extinction's at the bottom, just by itself. Not going to work. And
Punishment.
or punishment. Punishment would.
Well,
I'm just
They're gonna work, but
They're gonna work. They're not gonna work in the way that we think of a treatment working, in the sense of everyone loved it and it was great and we had a great time the whole time, and the friends we made along the way.
Yeah. But, I think sometimes people will say, I don't use extinction, without realizing that it is built into several different, ways in which we often teach. Like, extinction is just part of learning. One encounters extinction whenever one differentially learns. So FCT is a great example. There's usually a component, maybe it doesn't always have to be there, but usually it is a component of FCT.
But then it's similarly talking about extinction on some dimension of the terminal response. It's not quite the same as extinction of the whole response itself. In quite the same way. So we like this. We think it's great to try. I'd love to see more research in different populations and different groups, but it does seem like there's enough of a body now that you could feel comfortable looking at a few of these articles, maybe checking out the review paper first and looking at that big old table, picking one that sounds the most like these are the clients I typically work with, and then seeing how effective they are. I believe most of the research has been done with autistic individuals or individuals with kind of intellectual impairments or developmental disabilities. So how effective would this be with different populations? That's still a good question in terms of the generality of the procedures. But we give it a thumbs up as something to be thinking about in your treatment planning. All right. Well, let's move into the last section of the show, pairings.
Okay, here's a section where I tell you about other episodes you might like if you enjoy listening to this one. So we have a whole different smorgasbord of episodes that I felt like related to this topic. They include episode number 2. Wow, taking it back. Condition reinforcers in the social setting. You could definitely learn something about reinforcement in that one. You could also listen to episode 47, in which we discuss social reinforcer assessments specifically, including the Smaby et al. That they reference here. Episode 109, we talk about sensory extinction and some of the challenges related to extinction there. Episode 52, do humans prefer contingencies? We review the concurrent operants literature that attempts to establish ways to determine preference and some surprising findings there. Episode 138, delay tolerance with Dr. Jeffrey Tiger. And we talk a lot about fading in that one as well, and I think it's useful. We can't forget about episode 125, where we discuss resurgence. Wah, wah, wah.
I love resurgence.
And I just added this one, episode 131. We talked about prompt dependency with Dr. Katya Sividini-Mota, and I bring that one up not because it's directly related, but because for me it also looks at the ways in which you can make modifications to the parameters of reinforcement and have that have influences on behavior. So it was sort of parallel in its structure to this episode. Now, I also like to recommend a snack that you might enjoy while you're listening to these episodes. So I'm recommending some healthy alternatives that one could have, right? So the other options are still out there. They're still available for reinforcement. But here are some other ways you could contact reinforcement.
But this is the low quality reinforcement
it's magnitude,
list?
Rob, magnitude. You could have yourself a little bit more. So my snack recommendations are some air popped popcorn.
It's the low quality, high magnitude.
Some really dark chocolate squares with pistachios in them and raspberries in them.
I added the raspberry.
I see. Yum. Some fruit salad. Or
Fruit salad.
yummy, yummy. Or my personal favorite, a frozen banana with peanut butter on it.
What kind of peanut butter, though? High quality peanut butter?
Sugar-free.
Unsalted.
Low quality peanut butter.
You're not really helping, Rob. Pairings.
This treatment would be
All right,
ineffective for me.
Let's move along.
Well, we don't have to move along, Jackie. That's the end of the episode. It's the last segment.
Goodbye.
Your classic sign-off catchphrase?
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for listening to ABA Inside Track. We
Go to bed.
really appreciate it. If you haven't, please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us all sorts of places online. You can find us on all the socials as ABA Inside Track. You can find us on YouTube with the YouTube subtitling feature available. You can find us on our website, abainsidetrack.com, where you can find links to these articles as well as to all of our previous episodes and a place to purchase CEs for the vast majority of the episodes we have produced. And if you want even more ABA Inside Track content, don't forget to subscribe on patreon.com/ABA Inside Track, where for $5 a month, you can get every episode a week ahead of time, plus access to our quarterly or our seasonal live episodes, which come with one free CE. But if you say, I just want even more, what about books? Well, don't worry. We've got a tier for you where you can listen to us talk about a book every season. We've got our summer book club coming up where we'll be reading and discussing Walden 2. So if you want to get that, plus access to all of the previous book clubs we've done and 2 additional CEs at no additional charge, plus discounts at the regular CE store, go to patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. And of course, you can email us at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. And don't forget, if you're really interested in those CEs, you want our second secret code word, which is adventure, ADVENTURE. Adventure is out there. Big thanks to Dr. Jim Carr for recording our intro, outro music, to Kyle Sturry for interstitial music, and Dan Thabit of the Podcast Doctors for his amazing editing work. We'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye.